Cool. We're good?
We're good.
Alrighty. You've been out on a rampage again, targeting another couple of high-profile public figures this week.
Doing my best too, yeah. I took a trip out to the suburbs this morning, out to Ellenbrook. And
How was it out there?
Look, it was great.
For it.
It was a beautiful day. There were free donuts. There was families celebrating, face painting. The people of Ellenbrook seem, based on what I saw at least, very happy with their new train station.
Great. Pleased to see you. Warm reception for your particular brand of off-kilter public showmanship.
Look, I did try to keep things somewhat contained, but I did manage to have a brief word with the former Premier, Mark McGowan. He was there. Roger Cook was there. They'd taken Albo off at the previous stop, and kind of shuttled him away. So I didn't get to catch up with him again. But
keeping him out of the crosshairs. There are a few people online already who are suggesting you didn't go far enough. Some comparisons have been drawn to some other shots.
Well, look, we live in extreme times. I just came armed with my phone, that is all. And, as a committed practitioner of non-violence, I was keeping things relatively
No
under
Monopoly
control.
money tucked away in a backpack.
No Monopoly
hidden in the
money.
bushes.
No need to hide anything. No need to wear gloves or anything. It was all above board.
Meanwhile, in New York, the very targeted assassination of a United Healthcare CEO this week seems like an extremely premeditated, extremely well planned and executed, so far at least, escalation in that sort of debate.
That's right. This guy seems to kind of have some sense that he knows what he's doing. I mean, there was some speculation that I saw from the police that he was a disgruntled former customer or a disgruntled former employee.
Didn't feel like an action springing from rage or from, not from
Exactly.
sort of the hot, not the heat of the moment kind of
Yeah.
crime of passion so much as a very coolly
Yes.
premeditated, skillfully
Exactly. I
delivered.
think it was more of a political rage than
Yeah.
any kind of personal sense of grievance. I mean, who knows? It could have been both. But it seems to me like a well-executed piece of direct action from speaking from a strategic, tactical point of view rather than a moral point of view.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen a piece of direct action in my lifetime which has had as much of an impact as this has.
No, not as single isolated incident anyway. And I mean, a real kind of element of political theatre to it as well. I mean, obviously it kind of there's a rich heritage of political assassinations in the US, which this kind of taps into, I think, subconsciously at least, but also, albeit one that didn't appear to have a great deal of orchestration in terms of how it was received. It wasn't as though it was performed for an audience explicitly, but there are kind of little touches, the sort of the grin on the CCTV camera at the hostel, the words on the bullet casings, obviously, that imply or suggest some degree of awareness that this was kind of designed for public consumption for an audience.
I think so. I think we're dealing with a storyteller here. I mean, I think the words on the bullet, that's the clearest instance of messaging. But I mean, I think when we do direct action, we talk sometimes about the action logic. And I think in this case, the action logic checked out. You always want to have the message of the story embedded in your action. And I think in this case, it's pretty simple. It's, well, this guy's killing people, so I'm going to kill him.
What about the moral equation there? Do you think it checks out? Is there an argument? Is there a defensible case for this?
I think there's surely an argument. It's not one that I would make myself. I think that I have always come from that tradition of non-violence has always been deeply appealing to me in terms of direct action and kind of the initially appealing thing to me, and that kind of like even spiritual religious lineage of that has always been important to me. I can certainly see how other people might make a different moral equation, and the world is violent, and
I mean the US more so than possibly any other place in kind of like a direct interpersonal level. I mean, it's just a different context, a different temperature gauge that they're operating in, obviously.
Yeah, everything being amplified the way that it is. So look, I mean, I don't think it's for me to say. I'm just kind of more interested in what the impacts are of it, and I feel like it has tapped into something that was obviously there. I mean, I think it's kind of tapped into the same anti-establishment rage which has led to, say, the election of Donald Trump and to kind of the rise of populism and whatnot. This is maybe like the next stage of that, or another manifestation of that.
I mean, Trump famously said before a previous election that he could shoot someone in cold blood on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. Do you reckon this guy's going to do the same?
Well, look, so far it's looking pretty good for him. I imagine he's probably feeling pretty nervous and anxious, but he's also probably feeling pretty good that he's got away with it wherever he is.
Four days and counting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of remarkable. Like, it's not a flawless crime, obviously. It's not the perfect murder. There's been a few items, a few artifacts left behind, the water bottle, the phone, allegedly,
which
a
both
backpack.
seem like fairly major stuff-ups, but yeah, so far so good. I mean, I think the greatest detail of all was the smile at the hostel clerk or whatever.
Yeah, for two shots, you certainly kind of got a pretty good emotional range packed in.
For sure. And, you know, when we've kind of done direct action before or been involved with direct action before, sometimes the thing you talk about is having the right actor for the right actor for the action. And I think this guy was, from what we've seen of him, great talent.
If not spawning copycats yet, at least spawning lookalike contests.
Exactly. Yeah. Kind of dashing good looks. You know, you compare him to, say, Thomas Crooks, and you've got a very different.
Well, I mean, he didn't miss his shots. He didn't fumble the bag.
He didn't fumble the bag. No,
3 shots, and he got his guy. I mean, do you think the specific qualities of the shooter himself have contributed to the sort of the reception?
I mean, I think massively. I think that he. Like there is this almost like he's the breakout star of 2024, you know, him and the Hawk Tour girl and the Rizzler. It's the kind of the 3 big stars of 2024.
And what do you, I mean, let's dip into that for a sec. What do you think? You're more plugged into the sort of the online zeitgeist than I am most of the time, I'd say.
Yeah.
What do you think accounts for the way that he has cut through, resonated, got people going, really kind of like appealed to people, as I saw the New York Times this morning calling him a folk hero in certain corners of the internet. I think it's pretty much across the internet, really. Yeah,
I mean, I've seen, apart from journalists in the pages of the New York Times or similar places, I haven't seen anyone really criticising the guy. It seems to be fairly widespread. Fairly respectable figures as well who are kind of getting in on it and sharing the memes. I mean, even like, you know, Taylor Lorenz obviously quite publicly has been not exactly defending him, but
former Washington Post tech journalist, online culture expert.
Who is, I guess, in some ways an outsider and a controversial figure. But like, yeah, she also used to work for the Washington Post. I think one of the first tweets that was praising him was by a professor at a university in the US. So I think that like it seems to be like a kind of respectable position to be.
Do you think, I mean, the target obviously is the other side of this. There's the shooter and then there's the person he shot. Can you think of another industry, another sector, another issue where they are possibly quite as antipathetic or lacking in general political sympathy than healthcare?
I think that's why. I mean, I think it was. I mean, I'm making presumptions about what this guy's intentions were, but I think if they were to kind of spark some kind of broader anti-capitalist or anti-establishment, whatever, uprising or whatever, presuming that is the case, I think that the target was perfectly chosen, because there is probably no other industry that has as stronger impact on people's actual lives.
And just the sense of precarity, I suppose. Like health is so close to.
I read something today that was saying, or the other day, which said that most bankruptcies now in the US are due to health bills, which is just like, you know, it does show that that's affecting people.
And I mean, for all that, and for all the fact that it is just kind of constant background noise as a political issue, and has been for as long as, you know, for the entirety of my adult life of being aware of the US election cycles, nonetheless, it's kind of just been sort of like on the back burner, sitting in the background, wasn't a big feature of this recent election or arguably of the 2 previous ones, apart from maybe kind of a backlash against Obamacare to a certain extent in 2016. But I mean, it's really sort of the degree to which the issue has been brought through, even in the mainstream media coverage of the action itself, is quite something to behold.
Yes. Yeah.
And I mean, what do you think? You've spoken about sort of action logic and the way that this kind of, the design of this action, if you want to frame it in those terms, kind of, I suppose, contains the message itself in a way that makes it unavoidable.
Yeah.
But I think it's also just the fact that it resonates so deeply with so many people's direct lived experience.
That's right. Yeah. And the fact that it has been pushed out of that kind of mainstream discourse, like when things are silenced or shut down or pushed out like that, they don't disappear, they go elsewhere. And often where they go to is the extremes, and then that's going to resonate with people. Like I think you can see, the far right have done that in recent years with all kinds of various issues. Maybe there's a similar kind of thing going on here. I mean, just going back to what you asked earlier of what are the things that make him the folk hero, I think it's partly the issue. I think it's partly the target. I think it's partly the execution. I mean, people on the internet do love kind of gory, disturbing stuff, the footage, the CCTV footage of the incident. It's then just the guy's persona.
And I mean, I've seen it described as ghoulish, as macabre, the response to it.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't actually strike me as particularly appropriate to describe it in either of those terms. Like, it seems to me more like, I mean, the only immediate response I can think is to the killing of Osama bin Laden, for example. I can't think immediately of another public figure whose death has ignited this much collective celebration, or at least kind of like recognition. And so it doesn't strike me that it is that kind of
that seems almost a bit more ghoulish, because that really was just celebrating his death. Whereas this is, even the memes celebrating the guy, they seem to be doing it's a redirection, which is the classic thing that you want with direct action, is you redirect from what you've done to your issue.
Look, off the top of my head, I've read his name probably 100 times in the last few days. I can't even remember the CEO's name immediately. O'Brien, I want to say Humphreys. I've got no fucking idea. Kevin, I think his first name is maybe, or Brian. But the point is that he has become a pure avatar for that issue, for the kind of the institutional, the systemic institution of the US healthcare industry and all the inequities and iniquities that it kind of propagates.
And I think even broader than that, I think there's a broader systemic critique that seems to be coming in as well to the kind of...
And what makes this moment so ripe for that, do you think? You mentioned a few days ago, I think, about sort of the fake anti-establishment having just kind of seized power again in the States, and what that might kind of, what the response to that, the backlash to the backlash might be. So
I mean, I guess we probably haven't seen by the fake anti-establishment, that's kind of like Trump and Musk and all of their cronies or whatever. Like, we probably haven't seen them not deliver on their promises yet. But I think some people at least sense that that's coming, and maybe this person did, who knows?
Yeah.
But I just think that that rage doesn't go anywhere once you stir that up. It's got to have an outlet. It's either got to be satisfied or it's going to continue to escalate.
And what does this lead to? I mean, we were discussing before starting this episode about discussions online about whether these kind of isolated incidents in and of themselves do contribute or spark a kind of a broader social movement. I mean, mimetically at least, like political or targeted assassinations of public figures is certainly in vogue in the US right now. Obviously, I mean, the multiple attempts to shoot Trump are kind of the obvious precursor to this to some extent, I suppose. What do you think comes next? Can you see kind of like, are there certain other preconditions that are necessary for this kind of immediate upswell of critique to translate into some more material political change? Or is it just kind of like a point in time, a kind of a sudden flash that disappears or dissipates?
I mean, it's always so hard to say, right, with these kind of things, especially when you're in them, what the exact trigger points are. But I think it's both an indicator of where things are at and possibly then a catalyst for things to change further. I mean, there's been some talk around kind of how there's a sense of resignation in the US around, say, Trump's election, and that progressive seems to be retreating to some degree. How true that is, I don't know, and whether that opens up space for people further to the left, for leftists to step in. That seems like possibly a likely outcome, and this seems to fit with that. I think there's some degree of organisation that's needed for meaningful.
And I have to say,
movements.
again, that the design of this action or this assassination is such that, to me, it speaks, the vibe is that of a degree of organisation beyond just the action itself. Like it's kind of it's redolent or evocative of like a cell, an underground sleeper cell or something.
Yeah, you'd be surprised if this guy was acting purely alone, right? I mean, I think the interesting thing is like if he gets caught, then what happens to his public image?
Yeah.
Especially if he is actually a cool guy, like he kind of seems to be.
Definitely.
It's like
that easy smile does not bespeak a sort of an alienated misfit per se. It's not the kind of the Unabomber.
He's not the Joker. He's not the Unabomber. This guy seems like a kind of cool operator.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? We may find out if he's caught, but you'd imagine that parts of the establishment might be worried about that as well.
As in what happens at trial when he's finally given, has a soapbox and a stand and
when he has his day in court and when we find out a little bit more.
Didn't hurt Trump, obviously.
Exactly.
Hasn't hurt us, arguably. It's kind of There's certainly a playbook that goes along with all of this.
Yeah.
Indeed, I mean, you could very well see a extremely an emergent protest movement. You could see a trial in some future time being very well attended, pickets outside, lots of kind of the supporters certainly outnumbering the opponents to this guy. And I mean, not to say whatever this CEO's name was, rest in peace. You know, a wife and 2 sons allegedly, and by all accounts, the perfectly personable, kind of amiable, affable guy from various LinkedIn posts I've seen from other fucking health CEOs.
Yeah.
But that's not really the point. It's not what we're talking about here. It's not about the individual tragedy, which kind of weighed against the hundreds of thousands of avoidable healthcare deaths is kind of,
So what's your moral calculus on how do you, where do you attribute?
I mean, agnostic, I suppose. Again, I can't say that I care too much at a personal level. It's not, I mean, it just feels like an issue and a modus operandi that's out of my area personally. I mean, one thing that I've been thinking about recently is there an Australian equivalent? Like, could you see a figure or an issue that's so intensely animating and that would draw this level, that something that's so toxic that people would respond. Someone suggested to me maybe the CEO of Woolworths or Coles, but I can't quite see the big 2 supermarkets generating enough real kind of like personal animus. They might be jacking up fucking the cost of fruit and veg, but they're not kind of taking money in.
They're making life more difficult for people, but nowhere near to the same degree. I think it really, it takes something quite extreme. I don't know if there's anything in that.
I mean, and then the obvious kind of, analogy for us, for me, is the fossil fuel industry, for example. And it is just that difference between an issue that is immediately present in people's lives to a degree that it causes enough pain, enough hurt, enough anxiety, enough real immediate suffering in an immediate way, not just in terms of the impact, but in terms of the kind of the causal link between the actor and the protagonist and the antagonist. It's just not there.
It's not as clear. No, I mean, I remember Ministry for the Future, Kim Stanley Robinson novel, science fiction novel, and one of the plot points in that novel is about fossil fuel executives being assassinated, but it happens from memory after extremely catastrophic climate disasters.
Well, and I mean, the Tim Winton novel Juice, which you've just reviewed for Jacobin, right, is fairly similar there as well.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's all happening well after the fact in that novel.
In other words, once the pain and harm and impact has been felt at such a personal, there's just that sense of real. I think injustice is the core component of this, right? The key kind of theme or emotion.
And it's so obvious, and it rankles so much, and so many people seem to have been touched by it. Yeah. Thanks for listening to the Last Place on Earth podcast. My name's Jared Mazza. My co-host is Jesse Noakes. You can head to our website, lastplaceonearth.com.au, where you're going to find other podcast episodes, but you're also going to find news, opinion pieces, analysis, and more. So have a look. You can subscribe while you're there, and we'll talk to you next time.